A reptilian extraterrestrial race has been controlling planet Earth for thousands of years and putting its genetic bloodlines into the positions of power.
Pleasure Island. But the law. Suppose they... No, there's no risk. They never come back.
Okay, firstly, David, I just want to thank you for joining me today.
No problem.
You had inspirations, I believe, in a bookshop. Which led you to through this journey. So would you be able to give a brief explanation of what that was? And was it voices or inspirations?
Well, I suppose it was a bit of both, really. I mean, it was bewildering to start with, and for a while after that. When I look back at my life, from the moment that I became aware that something strange was happening, when I look back, I see that what I thought was just my life before was actually part of this whole process that's led me to where I am today. Because I was born in Leicester in the English East Midlands in a council house. My brother still lives there, actually. And we didn't have any money. And it was a childhood that was before smartphones, before computers, where you had to use your imagination and make your own entertainment. But I decided that I wanted to be a footballer when I got in the school football team. And I went on, and a series of very, very strange, shall we say, coincidences happened that pushed me on the road in that direction. And I eventually signed for Coventry City when I was 15. But I didn't last that long. I was with them for about 4 years. And then rheumatoid arthritis finished my career, or I thought it did. And then I went on to play for Hereford United, who were in the league in the last year I was with them. And then the arthritis really came back with a vengeance, and that was the end of it. And I was 21, just 21. My career really went to the age of 20. But what happened as a result of the arthritis is that I had to develop a fierce determination, or I was going under, because the arthritis, especially in the Hereford years, was with them for 2 years. Every morning when I did the warm-up in training, I was in agony until everything kind of loosened up. And I had to explain it away. I've got a bit of a pull, I've got a bit of a toenail problem or whatever. But it was always the same thing. It was the arthritis. But if I told them their goalkeeper's got rheumatoid arthritis and I'm struggling with it, then that would have been the end of it. They got another goalkeeper. But in the games, the adrenaline got me through. And every morning I woke up and I knew that in about a couple of hours, I was going to be in agony for about 30 minutes, 40 minutes. And, that does something to you, in terms of your determination. It releases something. You go beyond where most people would just say, no way. So then I went into journalism, and that gave me a big insight into the mainstream journalism arena. Then I went into radio and then television with the BBC. And then another series of extraordinary coincidences happened. where I ended up as a national spokesman for the British Green Party in the 1980s. It was like, in about 8 weeks or so, I went from joining the party, in fact, setting up a party on the Isle of Wight, and becoming its national spokesman or joint national spokesman. And it was at that point that I thought, this is not explainable by just me, because I set a sight. I wanted to be a footballer. It happened. That ended abruptly. I set my sights. I wanted to be a television presenter. I wanted to present the sport for the BBC on a program called Grandstand, no longer with us. And that happened. And then I went into this green arena because I was seeing what was happening to the planet, not global warming, by the way, but the destruction of beautiful areas with inappropriate development and lots of other things that were going on. I then started to think, this is strange. What's happening? And then I went through this situation that you speak of. I was in a newsagent shop on the Isle of Wight, and my son Gareth, who was a little boy then, was looking at the books, and I felt the atmosphere change around me. And I realize now it's some kind of electromagnetic field. But in those days, I thought, what's happening? Strange atmosphere around me now. And suddenly I heard this. It wasn't a voice. It was more of a really strong thought form that said, go and look at the books on the far side. And I knew this newsagent shop very well. It sold books and newspapers to the tourists and tourist things. And I knew the books were romantic novels for the tourists in the deck chairs. So I walked across there, bewildered, A, at what was happening, and B, well, why would I want to look at these books? And in among the Mills and Boon and the Barbara Cartland books was this one with a woman's face on the front called Mind to Mind. And of course, it was different to the rest. I picked it up and I read the blurb and I saw the word psychic. And immediately I thought, maybe this lady can tell me what's happening to me, because from the start, basically, of 1989, something started happening in my life, which got more and more powerful and more tangible, which was that when I was in a room alone, it didn't seem like I was alone. It was like something was there. And this went on and on and on as I was working for the BBC and working for the Green Party. And eventually, I'm in a hotel room in London working for the BBC. And I came back after a program and I sat on the bed and I looked out into the empty room. And this presence, if you like, was so strong, so tangible, that I said out into the room, if there's something there, would you please contact me, because you'll drive me up the wall. And so this was all the lead up to this situation in the newsagent shop. And I contacted Betty Shine, the writer of the book, and went to see her in Brighton, actually, not just outside of Brighton. I didn't tell her what was happening to me. I don't want to give her, any leads, if you like. So I said, look, I've got arthritis, and maybe your hands-on healing, which you used to kind of do, would help. But I really went along to think, I wonder if she'll pick anything up around me, because I'd never seen a psychic in my life before. It was all new to me. So I go along, and first two times I only went 4 times in total. It was a nice chat and, a bit of healing and all that. And then on the third occasion, I felt like a spider's web suddenly on my face. Again, an electromagnetic field, I now know, but it felt like a spider's web. And I was taken aback because I read in her book that sometimes when other levels of reality are trying to lock into you, you sometimes feel like a spider's web on your face. And because the connection is electromagnetic. And at the same time, that's just a few seconds later, she launches her head back and said, my God, I've got to close my eyes for this one. This is powerful. She went on to tell me then she was seeing a figure in her mind's eye, a symbolic figure, that was asking her to give me information. And this was that I was going to go out on a world stage and reveal great secrets. that I would face enormous opposition, but basically people needed to know what was being kept from them. I'm sitting there presenting the sport for the BBC and doing my stuff for the British Green Party. And of course, it all sounds and sounded to me very, very strange, to say the least. And one of the things that was said is that I was going to be led to knowledge, and that at other times, knowledge will be put directly into my mind, so I would just know it. And so something inside me said, go with it, go for it. And literally, very shortly afterwards, the BBC contacted me and said, we're not renewing your contract. And I was a young guy at the time, very, very young for the BBC sports department, but they weren't renewing my contract. I've had letters of commendation for my work and all that stuff, but suddenly they weren't doing it, which was kind of out of the blue. But what it did, it freed me to go on this journey and to start to see where it led. And where it led was I was led to knowledge. I mean, synchronistically, as Carl Jung would say, I found myself walking into people, books, documents, personal experiences that were all putting a certain view of the world in front of me, like the people that run it are not the people who really run it or appear to run it, and not those that really run it. And the whole thing started to unfold, and it's been going on now. I'm now in my 35th year of doing this, and it continues to unfold because, as I've said and impressed upon people so often, in the situation that we are in this human body, in this very low frequency kind of reality, the one thing you absolutely know that can't be questioned is whatever you know or you think you know, there's always more to know. And so I've found that for 35 years. It's like you get to a point and you think, well, I've got that now. I can see that. But what's next? And then something else, another gate opens, and you're going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper in the rabbit hole. One of the things that I find that has happened to the alternative media, which didn't exist when I started out, there was no alternative media, is that so much of it, but certainly the center core of it, has got to a point where it's basically saying, okay, this is how it is. And it's going round and round and round in a circle. And I'm seeing what should be open-minded exploration fusing and solidifying into little more than right-wing politics at the center. But there's so much to know and so many levels to all this that if you stop at one, i.e., is it Trump or Harris, then you're nowhere near the cutting edge.
You've been quite vocal about the alternative media on your social media channels, but if we can first go back to these experiences you were having, these inspirations. I know you've done a lot of research also into religion and the Abrahamic faiths, and Christianity speaks of demons, and in Islam they speak of the jinn. Have you ever questioned what these inspirations are and whether they could be tied into the things spoken about in scriptures?
Well, what I've found is that while so many religions, faiths, belief systems appear on the surface to be different, there's an enormous amount that they actually agree on. And you've just talked about that. You can add the Gnostic belief system to that. You can add the native people of South Africa, the Zulus, the Aboriginals to that, in the sense that they believe that this reality is being manipulated by a hidden force that doesn't have our best interests at heart, shall we say. And that's where this whole journey of mine has led me a long time ago, back in the 90s, to conclude that we are being manipulated from the hidden by a very malevolent force that operates and manipulates in our reality through a network that I call the global cult, a network of secret societies. And most of the people, even in the secret societies, don't know what the real game is and where it's supposed to lead. It's compartmentalization, the need to know. You only need to know what you need to know to make your contribution without knowing what you're actually contributing to in the end. And it's the real inner core of this global cult, as I call it, where the knowledge is held. And so we live in a world of two forms of knowledge. We've got the cult knowledge, the inner core of it, which has a far more advanced understanding of reality and obviously understands where the world is being taken and why. We're now seeing it more and more clearly. And at the same time, this cult has created the sources of information and communication for the general population. And those sources are what we call the education system, the programming system, the mainstream media. People overwhelmingly still, unfortunately, get their information from. And the idea of that source of communication for the target population is that you keep them dumbed down, you keep them in ignorance here of what they know. And that dynamic of the chasm of difference between what is passed on in terms of knowledge through the cult web and what the public are given is so vast that when people like me say, "Hey, this is what they're doing. This is how they're doing it," most people who come from a perspective of normal, which has been ingrained by this dumbing down system, they reject it immediately because they think it's not possible. It's far-fetched. It's far out. But what is far out? Far out is only something from the perspective of your sense of normal. You know, if your normal is squeezed and your sense of possibility is squeezed, then something out here is far out. But if it's not, then it's not far out. It's something to research. It's something to investigate. And my philosophy has been, very much like that of the Greek philosopher Socrates, to have the humility to know that whatever you know, there's always more to know. To know is to know you know nothing, Socrates is quoted as saying. That's the true knowledge. And the more you get into how much of reality we can actually see and perceive as a, quote, human, it's blatantly obvious that whatever we know, there's always more to know. I mean, visible light, which is the only band of frequency we can see, is ludicrously narrow. We can see virtually nothing in the space that we're looking at, only within that frequency band. So when you're in that situation, I mean, a bit of humility is necessary to say, hold on, whatever I think I know, there's always more to know. And that drives you on and drives you on and drives you on to seek out what you don't know. And what I'm saying is that if you stop for whatever reason and say, I got it now, well, okay, well, that's your right. That's your choice. But you ain't going to have it. You can't have it. There's so much outside of what you know that you don't yet know. So stop by all means, but I choose not to.
It's very true. And when you wake up and come to the realization about the world and it's not all what they tell you, and then when you try to speak to other people about these things, it's kind of like your wave has shifted to a different wavelength and they look at you and they get uncomfortable when you start to speak about things. So a lot of people do walk around and quite content.
You've just said something that's absolutely spot on. You mentioned the word wavelength. That's exactly what's happening. Over this last 35 years, you know, to understand how the world's manipulated and who by and how, you need to research so many different subjects. It's mind-blowing. Everything from, political manipulation, but massively the nature of reality. And, you know, when you look at even orthodox science, which I say is a religion, that is, again, extremely limiting. But even when you look at that and you see what they've discovered and what they've observed, you see that actually everything is about wavelength. I mentioned the fact that we can only see this band of frequency called visible light, this wavelength called visible light. And every time we think, every time we feel emotion, we're generating frequencies, we're generating wavelengths. And so our perception, how we see the world, how we see ourselves, is actually at one level, it's a band of frequency, it's a band of wavelengths. And so if you are opening your mind to an expanded state of consciousness, which everyone can, just a choice, then you're going to be resonating, broadcasting on a certain wavelength. And if you just believe everything that authority tells you, and you just see the world through a myopic vision, and everything you're told must be true, you don't question anything, then you are on a very different wavelength. So when you're talking there and describing your experience, that's exactly what's happening. You're talking here on a certain wavelength, from a certain wavelength perception, and people listening are listening from another wavelength perception. And you see what happens if you have two radio station frequencies broadcasting in the same space. They don't interfere with each other unless they're very close on the dial. They share the same space almost without interfering with each other. You know, my mother, she used to have this phrase. She used to say that someone looked at her gone out. Oh, she looked at me gone out, Dave. And that's a Leicester phrase for what? And that's how they look at you. What? Because they're not literally tuning into what you're tuning into. It doesn't make them bad people and you better people or anything like that. It just means you're literally on a different wavelength. And you see this in families. You can see family members on a completely different wavelength to the other members of the family. And we use phrases like black sheep of the family, or she's a bit weird, or he's a bit strange, when all they are is actually perceiving the world on a different wavelength to you.
So this podcast is called Unchained, and let's not beat around the bush. Who's controlling the world? Who's behind this agenda? I understand you spent a lot of time in Africa researching the Anunnaki. Does that all tie into what's going on presently?
Well, everything ties into everything else. I spent a lot of time in Africa with a guy called Credo Mutwa, who's a bloody genius. He was the official historian of the Zulu nation. They call him a Sanusi. Credo Mutwa was an amazing guy. I met him, first of all, through someone else when I was in South Africa speaking, and they said, well, you need to meet this guy. And we chatted for about 5 hours. We got on really, really well. And then I went back and we got on even better. I started doing interviews with him and stuff like that. And what was great about Credo is that he lived a long life. I mean, he died in his 90s. He went through all the initiations of the African Zulu legends, accounts, ways of seeing the world. But he also related that to what we call Western society. So what was fascinating for me is that by this time, I'd done a lot of research into all this when I met him. And we started chatting, and he's telling me about all these African legends and who was manipulating and from the hidden and all that. And it just synced with what I've been told. You know, when you've got a Zulu shaman telling you that Zulu legends talk about the Chitahuri reptilian race that's manipulating human society from the hidden, And at the same time, you're traveling America and you're meeting whistleblowers, people from the military industrial intelligence complex who want to get out information they can't themselves, and they're telling you the same, then there's something to look at. And you know that when you start talking about it, you're going to be ridiculed and laughed at. That's just the way it is. But if you care about what's happening and not about what people think of you, then you say it anyway. And when you ask the question, who's running the show? Well, what level are we talking about? Because that's how it works. There's different levels. And this is, as I've gone on through this 35 years, okay, I think I've got this. What don't I know? You're going deeper and deeper in the rabbit hole, and you're uncovering more and more of these levels. So one level is this global cult network of secret societies, and they're controlled ultimately by what I call the shadow people, the people you never see. And so if someone's on public display, like a Gates or a Schwab or whatever, they're still a gopher. They might be a very rich gopher. They might be powerful for people below them in the hierarchy, but they're still a gopher. They're not orchestrating it. And then from 1996, I went to America in 1996, and I went around America speaking to nobody. I mean, I'm telling you, nobody. I was speaking in people's front rooms in front of 5 people and stuff like that. But what happened on that first trip, it was 3 months long, and the next one too, which was the same, is that I started meeting people, again, this synchronicity that started with Betty Shine, who were telling me how they had experienced seeing people that appeared to be human change into a reptilian form. And again, the immediate reaction from the 5 sense-centered people is that's impossible. You can't go from a solid body to a solid body. And you know what? You can't. But this is why you have to research so many different subjects, crucially the nature of reality, because this world is not solid. It appears to be. But if you go deep enough into the quantum realm, you see that nothing has solidity. It's holographic. It's illusory solid. It's basically like putting a headset on in a virtual reality game and decoding a reality that's presented to you. And so you start to realize that what's happening with this so-called shape-shifting, which Craig Mutwa talked about and many others do going way back, is it's 2 energetic fields. You know, the body is an energetic field. It's an information field. It's like a mini Wi-Fi field, if you like, of information. And if you have dual fields, as these people do, a lot of these people do, you have 2 information sources. One is a human information source, and one is a reptilian, or even not even reptilian. There are others as well, a non-human, shall we say, information source. And what these people do is, in the normal course of life, they're presenting to you the information field that we call human. And so if you observe them and interact with them, you'll see a human. But there are times when this shift takes place where the other energetic field becomes the dominant one. And at that point, the observer sees the person go from a physical human to a physical, say, reptilian. But that's not what's happening. The observation, the observer, is decoding that information in here. This is where the shapeshift takes place, because we're living in a reality. It's a mirror, really, of the technological society that's appearing all around us. You know, we see all these AI and computers and what have you coming in and taking over more and more control. But what they're doing is mimicking technologically the very reality that we are experiencing and how we experience it. So, for instance, if you look on the internet at these video compilations of people who put the headset on in a virtual reality game, their sense of reality is instantly changed. It's instantly overridden and overtaken. You will have someone in an empty room, they'll put a headset on, and suddenly they're thrashing around, they're screaming, they're falling off their chair, because their reality has been completely taken over by the information being fed to their brain. And how do these computer games access the brain? Through the five senses. They do it through the sight senses, the hearing senses, the touch senses in the more sophisticated ones. They've got chairs that are moving in relation to the game to pull you in and make you think it's real even more. And that's basically what the human body is. It's a biological computer. I've been calling it that since the 1990s. And again, when you get into the science of it, again, you see that even orthodox science is explaining in its own way what I'm saying. How do we manifest reality? Well, the five senses are picking up frequency information. They turn that frequency information, whether it's the ears, obviously that's an obvious one with the sound waves, but they all do the same. They're picking up this frequency information, they change it and transform it into electrical information. They communicate it to the brain, and the brain then assembles that information into what we call an external reality. So basically what the body is, it's a fantastically advanced, to use that analogy, headset. So things like shape-shifting, while to five sense only realities seem impossible, become perfectly explainable when you get deeper and deeper into what actually reality is, which takes us to the next level of control, because you have this visible light, which is tiny. People say, well, these entities you say are manipulating from the hidden, why can't we see them? Well, because you can virtually see nothing. You know, for me, at the earliest age that a child can grasp it, they should be told that when they look into the space, whatever they're looking at, they're not seeing everything in that space. They're only seeing a tiny part of it, because that changes everything. Suddenly, the so-called paranormal becomes perfectly normal and explainable. You know, people say, I saw this UFO, it came out of nowhere and it went into nowhere. Or I saw this entity at the end of the bed, it just appeared out of nowhere and then disappeared into nowhere. And of course, five sense reality again says that's impossible, that's ridiculous, you're on something. But actually, it's not. All that's happening is these things, entities or UFOs, whatever, they're entering visible light. And to the observer, they appear out of nowhere. And then they leave visible light, and to the observer, they've disappeared into nowhere. So in dimensions very close to this one, but not close enough for us to be able to see them as a normal course of events, are this very low vibrational, non-human force that's manipulating human society via this global cult. This global cult is in our reality. It's interacting with this reality. It's interacting with us. So they're through governments and all these other things. But they're doing it on behalf of these non-human entities. And as the gates opened, if you like, on this journey I've been on, I started to realize, for example, that the people I was identifying as involved with this cult, and some of them very famous and that they were taking part in satanic ritual, sacrifice ritual, literally. I've talked to people all over the world who've experienced this, who've seen them, who've taken part in the rituals, often against their will. Some who then saw the light, but they've seen them and they've seen these people. And you find the same going on in every country, hidden, of course. And so immediately enormous numbers of questions start to get thrown out. why did they do it? Then you think, well, hold on a minute. The ancients, they used to sacrifice people to the gods. And they used to sacrifice young virgins to the gods, code for children, just like these people do now, today. And so you start looking at the ancients and what they were doing, and they were making sacrifices to the gods. So the next question is, well, what do the gods get out of it then? And you start to then go into a whole area of understanding that explains so much. First of all, the gods, as they're perceived and called different names in different ancient cultures, and the gods of today that these Satanists and very famous Satanists, many of them, partake in, are the same gods. They're these entities operating just outside of human sight. And so then the question comes, well, what do the gods get out of all this then? What's this sacrifice to them all about? And then some big pennies start to drop. One of the themes that I picked up from many different sources is that this non-human force just outside of human sight is feeding off low vibrational human energy, feeding off the emotional energy generated around the central theme of fear, anxiety, conflict, war, resentment, fury, all these different things. Again, it's been established by mainstream science that every time we feel emotion or every time we think, the nature of the emotion and the nature of the thought dictates the frequency we give off as a result. Every time we are in a state of fear, we're giving off frequencies that relate to that emotion. They're very low vibrational frequencies. Same with all these things that I'm talking about, all these emotions I'm talking about. And so when you have a world that is constantly manipulated to generate this low vibrational energy, you've got basically a world that's producing the sustenance, the energy that you feed off. So this force has no interest whatsoever in joy. They don't want people happy. They don't want people joyful. They don't want people peaceful. They don't want people in a state of balance and equilibrium. They want people generating what has become known, by people who've researched this, as loosh, this low vibrational energy. And so we have all these wars, we have all this conflict, we have all this suffering. You know, you travel around the world and, you know, the vast majority of the human race is not having a good time. They're trying to survive another day in places like Africa, South America, Central America, Asia, and so on. And every time you have a world war, it's like a loosh banquet for these entities. So much of this energy is being generated. Like I say, they don't want a peaceful world. It's the last thing they want because they don't get what they want, what they need as a result of a peaceful, happy, joyful, loving world. And so that understanding then started to, and of course it was explained to me by some of these Satanists as well, that you start to understand why they're doing these rituals to the gods and what the gods get out of it. Because what they're doing in these rituals is they're putting the sacrifice through a sequence. They use Babylonian rituals and Egyptian rituals and stuff like that because they work, and they repeat them because they work. If it works, why change it? And what they're doing is they're building up the terror in these in the sacrificed person. As they generate the terror because of what's happening, that's a very, very powerful low vibrational energy, which these entities just outside of human sight are feeding off. You know, we see the body language of emotion and reaction. You know, people screaming or anxious or, oh my God, and all this stuff. But we don't see the energy coming off them. we see the result of it. And the energy that's coming off them we can't see it because it's going into a level of reality, an energetic wavelength, if you like, that where these entities are, and they're feeding off it. And the Satanists themselves that take part in our reality in these rituals, they drink the blood of the sacrifice because terror infuses into the blood a very powerful adrenaline, apparently, which they then drink like a drug. So this is what's happening in these rituals. And so then that kind of concentrates the mind, because if you've got people who will sacrifice children for this end, for this reason, and have no empathy with the child whatsoever, no compassion, nothing, then why would we be surprised that they would run the world as they do, that produces so much suffering and so much conflict and so much trauma? That's what they want. It generates their loosh. So, okay, I get that. What don't I know? And in the end, what you realize is what we're living in is not a natural reality. It's a simulated reality. Natural reality, if you want to call it like that, exists beyond the simulation. It's like literally a virtual reality game of incredible advancement compared with the ones we know. But again, this technological explosion we're experiencing is mirroring the very reality that we're experiencing. So if you look at Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi is information encoded in a radiation field in a particular way. And if there was Wi-Fi in this room, where is it? You can't see it. It's outside of visible light. It can affect you electromagnetically, but you can't see it. You're not aware of it. But you get a computer and you lock it into that Wi-Fi field, and it will decode it into what we see on the screen. Because people think the internet is graphics and pictures and videos, and it is, but only on the screen. Everywhere else, it's Wi-Fi fields and electrical circuits and so on. And we're doing exactly the same in the way I described earlier, through the body, the body biological computer. It's through the five senses locking in to this information field. That's what this simulation is. It's not a construct, it's an information field. We turn it into an apparent construct by decoding it, right? The computer decodes it. So we're picking it up with the five senses at a frequency level, and then we're turning it into electrical information, and then eventually holographic digital information. And then we perceive that to be an external world when actually it's going on in here. Because I'm looking at this computer, where is the decoded world of the computer? It's on the screen, yes, so I can see it, but it's actually the decoding is all going on inside the computer, and the decoding is also all going on inside us. So, this is takes us to a level where the very foundation of this conspiracy for human control is not Trump or Harris. It's the very trickery that convinces us we're experiencing a reality that's nothing like actually we think we're experiencing. This is why I've been so vehement in saying to the what I call the hijacked level of the alternative media that gets all the algorithmic support and all the funding and promotion, you're keeping people in a slightly bigger box than the population in general is in, but you're still keeping them in a box because you're not even beginning to see the scale of what is going on. And if you don't realize the scale of what's going on, you're never going to find an answer to it. Trump could be the greatest politician. He's not, but he could be the greatest politician in human history. But 4 years from now, be replaced by someone else. The answers don't lie at that level. They lie in understanding reality and how we can make reality work for us instead of being pawns of the reality. Because if you are living an illusion, the illusion only controls you if you think the illusion is real. When you realize the illusion is an illusion, then you can start to withdraw from its impact upon you. It's like if you have a dream and you believe the dream is real, like most dreams, then you're going to be impacted emotionally. You're going to be impacted mentally. You're going to wake up at the start maybe and sweating and saying, "Oh my God, I've had a nightmare." But you can also have what they call lucid dreams, where you're in a dream, but you know it's a dream. And because you're an observer of the dream and you know it's a dream, you're not impacted emotionally and mentally in the way that you normally would be. Because you can see the game, it's just a dream. And that's what happens when you start to understand what this reality is. But if you're focusing on Trump's the answer or whatever, then you're not going to expand your awareness to the level that can get you out of here.
You've spoken a lot about the alternative media on your social media accounts. Some of the people you've called out are the likes of Andrew Tate and Candace Owens. What are your thoughts on these individuals who, on the surface, appear to be challenging the powers that be? Well,
for me, like I said right at the start, whatever you know, there's always more to know. When you think you've got it and you know, then you enter the eddy and you're going round and round, and the river of knowledge, awareness is flowing past you. And the focus of attention of not just the people you've mentioned, but the others is basically the five sense world. That's it. And of course, you have to acknowledge that because we're experiencing it. My God, I've been doing it for 35 years, that level. But if you do it only at that level, then you're holding people who choose to follow you. You're holding them in a sense of reality that is incredibly limited. They may realize, as most of the general population does not, that there's a scam going on, but they're only seeing a very low level of the scam. And, I must say, I do smile to myself these days because I see people coming out with stuff and they say breaking news or bombshell revelation. And it was in my books 20 years ago, 25 years ago, sometimes. It's all there. I saw a lady, she was a doctor, and what she's been saying about the and everything like that, very good, yeah. But she was saying, well, there must be some level that orchestrates all this between the countries. And I'm thinking, well, that was in my books 20, 25 years ago, how that structure works, how it's possible, how they do it. People, they just get stuck even in the myopia of what's going on. And, in terms of Andrew Tate, he has picked up on something that's absolutely happening. The male of certainly the Western world is being targeted to become docile and toxic masculinity and all this stuff. And that's genuinely happening. And I've written about it long before Andrew Tate. But if your response to that is to strut around exuding testosterone, saying that a real man has a big Bugatti and this, that, and the other, and all the stuff that goes on, then you're not taking people to a state of balance from the imbalance of male docility. You're taking them to the other extreme. You don't need to strut around showing your chest and showing off your car collection to be a, quote, man. You just have to have a backbone that won't bend in terms of doing what you believe to be right. I don't have to take my shirt off, and not that anyone wants to see that, but I don't have to take my shirt off to be a man. I just won't bloody have it. And I'm not a man anyway. I'm a consciousness having an experience called a man, which is very, 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 very different. So it's the limitation, because, like I said earlier, there was no alternative media when I started out. There was a few disparate individuals talking about the fact that the world's not controlled by the people we think it is. And that was it. And that there was an agenda for the constant centralization of power to the point where we have a global government dictating to everybody from a central point. That's exactly what the game is, as it plays out in its different ways. And there was a period, particularly towards the end of the 90s and into the 2000s, where we had all the invasions of Iraq and 9/11 and what have you, where more people did start to ask, well, hold on, is this orchestrated, or is this not really random, is it really? I mean, when you look at it. So we were starting to really get somewhere. And you had people starting to grasp that what we call politics and democracies are actually one-party states. If you look at the two parties who form governments in Britain, the two parties that form governments in America, for example, one may move in a certain direction slower because its natural base and natural support doesn't want to go in that direction. And the other one, whose natural support and base has no problem going in that direction, well, they in power can go quicker. But they're still going in the same direction. And they're still heading to the same outcome. It's a one-party state. It's like they used to say in America, Americans who were investigating this back in the 1990s, I remember, they used to say, it doesn't matter who you vote for, the government still gets in. Yeah, the government of this global cult that is ultimately answerable to this non-human force, which is in the end is answerable to a very distorted state of consciousness that religions call Satan and Iblis and Yoda Bayoth, etc., depending on the belief system. But they're basically describing the same force. That's a state of consciousness, which is expressing itself through this non-human force, which expresses itself through this global cult, and which expresses itself into human experience. So we are in a situation where the alternative media has regressed since. It was such a wonderful opportunity because, as I said at the time, this cult has now entered the room. It's not under the radar anymore. It's in your face. Look at the world. Look how they've all responded, almost all, in exactly the same way. They're all telling you the same story. And that's because it's not least through the World Health Organization in this case, which was started by the Rockefeller family and is controlled today by Bill Gates, who's a gopher for the Rockefeller family. And it was a wonderful opportunity because people could start to see tangibly that the forces at work were not what they thought they were. And so the genie was starting to leave the bottle. And when I started out in 1990, virtually no one was interested in this stuff. Virtually no one. I mean, you were standing in the street handing out leaflets before, the internet got underway to get people to come to an event to hear this stuff. I mean, there was no one wanted to know. But there was an enormous number of people who suddenly started to see it. That's why, I was taking part in marches in London. In the end, there were hundreds of thousands of people walking through the streets of London in protest at the restrictions. It was a wonderful opportunity. And there was a wonderful unity among those people. We may have had different belief systems, religious belief systems and political belief systems, whatever. But there was this wonderful unity, this unity of purpose against what they was perceived as a common foe. And then what happened is that that opportunity of that awakening, expanding and expanding and expanding deeper and deeper into greater and greater knowledge of the scale of this, and by the scale, actually, how we can deal with it. People came into the alternative media, a lot of them from the mainstream, And a lot of them that bought the whole, and they suddenly the go-to people over and the manipulation of humanity. And they knew nothing. They hadn't done 35 years of research. They'd just come into it and suddenly they were the experts. Why? Because they were getting the algorithmic support. They were getting the major interview support and promotion. And suddenly the alternative media regressed from seeing that the two-party state is an illusion, and you have to go one step back to see the force that's working through both parent sides, left and right. And it's regressed into, in effect, like I said earlier, right-wing politics. You know, I've just seen today a big banner for a Tucker Carlson speaking tour, and he's having a guest speaker at each one as he goes around America, ending up with Trump Jr. Just before the election. And when you look at the guest speakers, it's like a who's who of right-wing politics and that which pushes right-wing politics. So from my perspective, the alternative media has been hijacked. It's been hijacked by right-wing politics. And that is one step back, even from seeing that it's a one-party state, never mind how far it is back from realizing the true scale of human control and human oppression, the very reality that we're experiencing. And it's basically created this barricade around that myopia. And that's where everyone's focused. So people like me, I've been doing this for 35 years. I've been researching this full time for 35 years, are marginalized by this group. And they're saying, well, I wonder what's happening now. I wonder how this works. And I'm thinking, well, look at me bloody books, mate, from decades ago. It's in there, but there won't. Because some have gone in there knowing exactly what they're doing, but the vast majority, it's very simple. If you want to create this barricade myopia of what the conspiracy is, then you get people who believe that's what it is, and you promote the hell out of them. And it will naturally happen. And, you know, on the other side of that barricade are some fantastic people in the alternative media that don't get the promotion, that don't get the algorithmic support, don't get the funding, who do get it and are willing to go into areas that the mainstream alternative is not. Fantastic people, but they're marginalized too and pushed to the periphery because the genie was coming out of the bottle during. I saw it, and the cult looked at that and said, well, so many people have seen that the world's not like they thought it was. There's no putting the genie back in the bowl. It ain't going to happen. Too many people have seen it. So we're going to stop the genie going any further out of the bowl. And that's when we saw this, this unity that was so fantastic during COVID, kind of regress into its belief systems again. And it's ended up as right-wing politics is the alternative. No, it's not. It's part of the problem.
You had an amazing book called Human Race, Get Off Your Knees. If the human race doesn't get off their knees, what do you foresee in the future happening? I heard a term used the other day called transhumanism, which is a mixture of AI and the human mind. Do you know much about this?
How long have you got, mate? You know, this is a massive area of my research going way, way back. Because how does a few people, and in terms of this global cult, it is a few compared with the global population. How do you control the billions? You do it through controlling their perception of reality, because from perception comes their behavior. People behave as they do because they perceive as they do. Simple as that. So that the stadium in which this is all played out is perception, control of perception. This is what censorship is all about. You know, censorship is about having people only hear what you want them to hear, because if they hear that and nothing else, they will have a perception of reality, which is what you want them to have. That's what censorship's about. And I said long ago that the plan was to so control information through censorship that no one would ever, at some point, ever hear or see anything that authority didn't want them to see and hear. And we've got this guy, Starmer, he's already started. I mean, this guy is an absolute cult gopher. When people say, oh, he ain't got a clue. Oh, he has. He's not the brightest bulb in the box, but he absolutely knows what he's doing, because he's doing what he's told to do. He's representing this cult at levels like the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab. And when you see what he's doing in a few weeks since he got to power with 34% of the people who voted, it's just ticking off the wish list. And one of the things that we've seen in America, but it's a universal thing, is they want to disconnect people from any independent income and any independent state. So if you, for instance, are working for an independent company, and the independent company is working as best it can, outside of the corporate system, then you have choices. You have a certain amount of independence. If you have money savings, you have a certain amount of independence. What they want to do is delete that. They want to delete independence. They want to create dependency, because dependency equals control. What you are dependent upon controls you. And so what they want in the end is people to be parted from their independence in all its forms and depend upon a universal basic income from authority, which will be a pittance. And AI will run everything. So all the jobs will go. They're already going, but I mean, it's going to be an incredible destruction of work opportunities through AI. And once you're on a universal basic income, as the head of the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, said, you will own nothing and be happy. Well, you will own nothing, more like. They want to take people's homes away through various ways that I talk about in the books. They want to make it impossible for people to financially survive without dependency on the government. That's what they want. And already Starmer is highlighting that. He's pointing the way that there's going to be economic pain, and that will create a better tomorrow. Well, I've got news for you. The better tomorrow bit is not what it's about. It's just more and more economic deprivation until everyone's the same. That's what they want. And you have perception as the goal, control of perception, because everything comes from that. And the ultimate control of perception, and I've been writing about this now for decades, is to connect the human brain to artificial intelligence, so that human thinking and reaction as we know it disappears, and we get our thoughts and our responses from AI direct. And that will create what I've been warning about all these decades, the human hive mind. That's what they want. And there are people who have openly talked about this. There's a guy in America, he's a Google executive called Ray Kurzweil. It's called a futurist, predicts the future. Well, it's very easy to predict the future if you're part of the cabal that actually knows what the future is going to be, if we allow them to have it. Because, if nothing intervenes in the projected future, then you're going to be right. And so he has said that by 2030, people will be connected to artificial intelligence.
That's not far away either, is it?
No. But the thing is, I'll come to that in a second. It's already happening, and I'll tell you how. But and he says that once that connection is made, AI will do more and more of human thinking until human thinking as we know it is negligible. In other words, it disappears. And suddenly you have this hive mind connection, which from a central point, you can dictate the perceptions of the entire population. So how are they going to do this? There's a lot of diversions. One of them is Elon Musk's Neuralink, where they take a bit of your skull away and put wires in your brain. No, that's Stone Age, mate. How it's being done is through nanotechnology, and it's being done all the time. The hive mind is being created and expanded every day, and they call it the cloud. These are the towers in urban areas, the 5G towers with 6G, 7G to come. These are the low orbit satellites that are going up in their tens of bloody thousands to project this stuff at the Earth. Because in the end, they want every inch of the planet covered with this cloud. Why? Because through the cloud, through the wavelengths projected through the cloud, the electromagnetic cloud, that's how the hive mind is being created. So if you have wavelengths and information, instruction, perception being sent through this cloud, then what you need is a receiver at the other end to pick this up and turn it into a human perception. What they're seeing, and I've seen it myself, and I'm in contact with people who do this work, they're seeing nanotechnology self-replicating and building systems in the body. It's there. You can see it on electron microscopes. Extraordinary. And it's getting into the brain. And the key substance, there are others, is something called graphene oxide. Graphene oxide is a superconductor of electricity. In other words, if you think the brain communicates and processes information electrically, anything that gets in there and impacts upon that is going to change the way you perceive reality. The body communicates with the brain with the body electrically. So anything that gets in the way of that is going to have consequences. But graphene oxide also amplifies the power of electromagnetic fields inside the body. So if you come into contact with an electromagnetic field and you've got graphene oxide in your body, then the impact on you of that field will be magnified many, many times. There are whistleblowers that have talked about the chemtrails who've been involved in that. They talk about graphene oxide being in that. And I know people that do blood analysis, and they've done analysis on people. Of course, they've found the graphene oxide and these self-replicating systems inside them. And so the idea is that the cloud, the electromagnetic cloud, which people like Elon Musk are adding to all the time. He goes on Twitter X and brags about another rocket's gone up with more satellites. They're generating this cloud and it's getting more and more expansive. And the idea is that it starts dictating our sense of reality. And I've met so many people who said that the people they knew, they're not the same people. One word that keeps coming up is they look vacant. They've got no conversation anymore. They seem far away and not with it where they were before. And this is the sort of thing you're going to get. Of course, it's the impact physically has meant so many people have died and had life-changing physical effects as well. But again, if you go back to the human sacrifice, you can start to understand the mentality that will be quite happy to do this without any compassion, without any empathy for the consequences for those they're doing it to. This is the mentality we're dealing with. And one of the hardest things to get across all these years has been the scale of evil that we're dealing with. I define evil as the absence of love. And evil is an inversion. In fact, funnily enough, the word evil is an inversion of the word live, and it is an inversion of life. And so you look at the Satanists and look at all their symbols, they're all inverted. inverted pentagram, inverted cross, whatever. And they do that because they are symbolizing the inversion they're imposing on the world. Everything's upside down. Why are people dying of hunger in a world of plenty? It's upside down. It's ridiculous.
100%. Yeah.
So if people don't grasp the way that all this connects, and therefore how this force is operating through all these different things, and once you start to see that, all the world falls into place. If you don't see it, if you still see things as apart from each other, then and you see a drug protection agency is genuinely seeking to protect the public, then you're never going to get it.
It looks like we're going towards the digital ID, and there's a saying you said a long time ago, problem, reaction, solution. You see it more often now with social media, the way they put everyone against each other based on our differences. How do we battle this? Is this a battle that we can win? Because say something, they'll just shadow ban you, pass new laws to make it different. How do we win this?
Yeah, well, it's a choice. And it's worth just looking at how a few can control the many. I remember over the years, less so now, but over the years, people have said, a few people can't control the world. It takes too many people. It doesn't. It takes a certain system. It takes a certain mentality. So if people can just visualize a pyramid, hierarchy pyramid, and at the top of that pyramid, way, way in the shadows, is the inner core of this global cult that answers to this non-human force. And then what it does is impose its will, its agenda, upon the level below it. And that level acquiesces to the level above and imposes it on the level below. And very soon after you come down from that peak of the pyramid, you're meeting levels of the hierarchy that have no idea there is a hierarchy, no idea there is a cult, and certainly not a point where it's all coming from. They're just doing what that level above them, what they perceive to be their superiors, tell them to do. And what they then do is impose it on the level below them. So you come down the pyramid of human society with imposition, acquiescence, imposition, acquiescence, imposition, acquiescence. And eventually you come to the bottom of the pyramid where most of us are in the hierarchy. And if we, as billions of people, submit and acquiesce to that level of the pyramid that's imposing upon us, then we complete a circuit between the tiny few at the top of the pyramid and the mass of the people, in which the agenda, the will of the tiny few is imposed upon the people. And it's not imposed, it's acquiesced to. Fascism doesn't get introduced by fascists. There's never enough of them. Fascism and communism and tyranny comes in because of the acquiescence of the population, the masses, to tyranny. Without the acquiescence, there can be no tyranny. So one of the things they have to do is divide and rule us. They have to get us fighting among ourselves over different beliefs and what have you, so that we're too busy fighting each other to realize we're all being manipulated by the same force to the same end, and to put aside the differences we have. See, I couldn't care less what people believe. That's absolutely their right. It's none of my business. The only time I get interested is when people seek to impose what they believe on the rest of us. And that's the problem. And that's how we got into this mess. By people having a belief system, a religious belief system, whatever, political belief system, and then seeking to impose it on everyone else. Without that, we could all live our lives as we saw fit, and get on and just accept we don't see the world the same, without all the conflict and without all the imposition. So what they've done is manipulated the population to impose the agenda upon each other. You have the woke mentality, for instance, in what's laughingly now called the left in politics. I grew up in the left in politics when it was challenging millionaires then, not billionaires, and it was challenging the centralization of power. But now the wokers are all in favor of it. If a billionaire funds them, then the billionaire's a wonderful person, no matter if he's advancing the agenda of the cult, which they have no idea exists. So it's a choice. We can go on as we are, fighting among each other and seeking to impose our beliefs on each other. If we do that, then we're going to end up in a dystopia so complete, we won't even realize it's a dystopia because we will not be making our own thoughts anymore. They'll be given to us. You will own nothing and be happy. Why would you be happy in a situation of control? Because you're told you're happy in a situation of control via AI communicating with your brain. I mean, this is where we're going. So what I'm saying is, look, we've got to start realizing that no matter what your religious belief or cultural belief, we're all being manipulated by the same force. So why don't we just put that aside and just focus, at least for a while, on what actually is the common foe for all of us? Because what's happening, you see, is divide and rule is absolutely vital. Without divide and rule, they couldn't do it. So there's people in Britain who don't like the now vast number of migrants coming in unchecked. We don't know who they are. We don't know where they've come from. And there's no apparent end to it. And they're seeing their services and everything falling apart. They're seeing people struggling to put food on the table, and migrants that are illegal coming in and being given hotels and money and all the rest of it. But what we've got to understand is that's what this cult wants, because I've documented this in my books in detail, has been behind the open borders. It's behind them. People like Starmer don't want to stop the boats crossing the channel. They want more of them. This is why, you listen to leaked conversations between the French Navy and the British Border Police, and they're constantly just handing them over. I mean, there's no effort to stop it. And what the cult knows is if you keep doing that and doing that and doing that, and not only put them in hotels and give them money and et cetera, but you want the population to see you're doing that because you're winding them up. And what happens then is eventually there's a reaction against it. We've seen some of it. We haven't seen even the beginning of it yet, if it goes on, because people reach a point where either they accept something ongoing forever and its consequences, or they start to get violent.
They've created a pressure cooker.
This is something you can see all over the world. You take the Palestinians and the Israelis. I mean, there's lots of shades of grey and all that with Hamas and the Israeli government and stuff. But if you take the people, if you go on ignoring injustice blatantly, decade after decade, you do put people in a position where they either accept it or they have to challenge it another way. And so what they've been doing is opening the borders. They've been more and more winding up the indigenous population, many of whom are migrants, by the way, who also don't want it because they can see the consequences of, I mean, you put a jug under a tap of water and don't turn the tap off. Well, what's going to happen? It's going to overflow. And the more you go on, the more it's going to overflow. I mean, this is what's being done purposely. And they want this conflict. They want this divide and rule. And it's somehow people have just got to stop and say, hold on a minute, we're all being manipulated by the same force. Let's just put everything down and let's look at this again. Because if we don't, then there will be civil war. There'll be civil war in many countries because of this, and because that's what the cult wants.
Yeah, and I don't know if you agree, but I feel like that is etching towards that digital ID, because if they're bringing in unchecked people, some of them could have criminal histories going around causing mischief, then the obvious resolution to that would be the digital ID. Okay, we'll get everyone on a digital ID. We know their criminal history, and then people would be asking for that because there's so much chaos going on.
Exactly right. Problem reaction solution is a devastating tool of perceptual manipulation because you are able to push things through and to change society in ways without the problem, society wouldn't have it. For instance, as they did claim that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, there wasn't even a problem. It doesn't even have to be a real problem. It can be a made-up problem, as long as the perception is that it's a problem. And that justified this horrific invasion of Iraq with all the consequences across the Middle East, thanks to Tony Blair. And Tony Blair, of course, is the one that in this country is pushing more than anyone the digital ID. So if you can have a problem that people perceive as a problem, then the solution to it can be accepted when without the problem, it wouldn't even be accepted or even begin to be accepted. So if you said to people, as you rightly say, we're going to have a digital ID and we're going to know basically where everyone is all the time and what have you, then people say, well, we're not having that. That's fascism. We're not having that. But then you use the scenario you just said. Oh, well, this will solve this problem or solve that problem. Then people become more open to it. And I've seen it over the years so many times, this thing being played. I mean, if you look into 9/11, I've written a whole book about it, a real thick book exposing 9/11. It wasn't done by 19 Arab hijackers. Absolutely ridiculous when you look at the evidence. But that problem led to invasions of Afghanistan and then on across the Middle East. It led to the Patriot Act in America, which took away basic freedoms, which had clearly been written before 9/11 happened. So 9/11 changed American society, and it changed the Middle East in many ways because of a problem that was blatantly created by, there was a network that involved the American intelligence network and the American military and the Israeli intelligence network, Mossad, and the Israeli military. It's a joint thing. And of course, they blame Saudi Arabia for it, but that's how it came about. And as a result, so many things happened that wouldn't have happened otherwise. Problem reaction solution is used all the time. So why do they want a digital ID? And why do they want these 15-minute cities, as they call them? They're actually 15-minute communities within cities, whereby you have everything you need, according to the people imposing them, within 15 minutes walk or bike ride of your house. So you don't have to move. And what they want is these communities increasingly isolated from everyone else and communicating through the internet, which they can switch off anytime they bloody like. And what you saw during lockdown, people social distancing and all that, that was all part of the preparation, the perceptual preparation for these 15-minute cities. This is why they are targeting car ownership in such a blatant way. I mean, this Labour government has come in and said immediately it will support councils that want to impose 20-mile-an-hour speed limits. Now, I mean, I've been in London with this Sadiq Khan guy and seen what the 20-mile-an-hour speed limits are like. And it's a nightmare. Yeah. And also it's producing more pollution because you're in a lower gear most of the time. This is the thing, you see, it's nothing to do with the environment. That's the scam. That's the no problem reaction solution. That's why
it's just a stepping stone, isn't it, to what they really want?
Exactly that. So all these targeting of vehicles and what it's doing is making it more and more and more expensive to have a car and to have independence of movement, independence again. Because they want you in a situation of dependency on public transport, which they control. And so the whole idea of the electric car, for instance, is nothing to do with the environment. It's about moving to autonomous cars that drive themselves, but you won't own it. You'll hire it.
Yeah.
And this is the thing about why electric cars. If you want a computer controlled vehicle, it's got to be electrical. Can't have computer controlled petrol and diesel cars. So the idea is that you get in a car, and with a petrol and diesel car, you can pretty much drive where you want. Yep. Okay, there's some restrictions, but you pretty much. But with an autonomous car, which is where electrical cars are moving to, this is why people like Tesla and Musk are moving towards that. Then the computer will decide where you can and cannot go. And way back in the 1990s in the books, I was showing maps of America, for instance, of what was planned in terms of just absolutely enormous parts of America that would be no-go areas to the general population. And it seemed fantastic at the time when you see all these red areas where no people were allowed. Massive, massive areas. But if you have a computer-controlled car that's programmed not to go to those areas, well, how are you going to get there?
That's right.
So that's what it's all about. And I've got the sun coming up now. Or sun going down, actually.
It's quite scary, isn't it? Because if you can imagine a world with digital IDs, digital currency, digital cars, even digital supermarkets as well, where you can't even get in them without a QR code, all of which could be turned off like that if you step out of line. It's
about forcing people to do things. So forcing behavior, enforcement of behavior. So the universal basic income, you would not get it if you challenge the system. Mm. You would not get into a supermarket if you challenge the system. They just turn your QR code off. And people say, well, that's a far off. No, they're doing it in China.
It's not exactly in China, yeah. It's happening now.
No. Yeah. I said decades ago, if you want to see where the West is planned to go, look at China today. China, because it's such a controlled society, it's able to push things through much quicker than the West that has to, well, until recently, pay lip service to freedom and democracy. And so it's been able to move this quicker in China than in the West, although we're catching up fast now after COVID, which, funny enough, it's supposed to have come out of China. They say it did. And so we are looking at a level of control that beggars belief, which includes your very thoughts and where they come from. So isn't it time to put aside the irrelevant fault lines of divide and rule, to stop looking at focusing on things that divide us and just realize that we're all in this together? And if we don't come together in some kind of unity of response, then they'll get what they want.
Do you ever fear for your life? Because there have been people that have spoken up who have wound up missing, to put it bluntly, dead. So do you ever fear for your life because you're in the belly of the beast here in Britain?
No, because I don't care. Once you realize that you're not human, that's a brief experience which you're having. And what the I is consciousness, a state of awareness, a state of being aware. How aware is what they're trying to manipulate through this cult. But ultimately, we are consciousness. And when this body ceases to decode this simulation, our consciousness is released and we enter another level of reality. I mean, just talk to near-death experiences as I have, and I've read their accounts and watched their accounts, and legions of them. And they tell a very, very common story. I go into that in my new book, The Reveal, along with many other things. So I'm consciousness. Whether I'm in a body or not in a body, I'm consciousness. I'm eternal. I am infinite. So I have a choice. Am I going to keep my mouth shut and worry about whether they're going to take me out? And therefore leave them to it? Or am I going to do everything I can to make a difference? And if they take me out, well, they take me out. Why is that a problem? I'm still the consciousness that I was before, and I am after. So I don't think about that, and I don't think about consequences. You see, when you your focus is doing what you believe to be right, then you don't go through a consequence list, because to do that is to say, I would contemplate, if the consequences are too bad, not doing what I believe to be right. I will not do that. I refuse to do that. So I do what I do, and I say what I say, and I am what I am. I'm not changing out of fear of consequences. But, there are other forces at work, shall we say, that are far more powerful than these bunch of prats that are manipulating us. And if you tune into them, if you connect into them, then they won't take you out. Why? Because they can't. It's a long story, but they can't. They can if you believe in their world, then they can.
We hope that you live a long, long life and continue to do the great work that you've been doing valiantly. But if this is the last time we hear from David Icke, and this is the last interview you give to people, what is your message to the world?
Remember who you are. Everything comes from that. If you have a self-identity that you're a human and you're living in this human world, and that's through you are the labels of a human life, then you will live a life of limitation, because you are associating, you are self-identifying with limitation. Because once you think, who am I? I'm a human. Well, that immediately connects you to limitation, to I can't, to it's not possible, and to all the fears that are generated out of the human experience. But when you realize that you are consciousness having a brief human experience, and that consciousness is eternal and will be forever, exploring forever, then those things don't affect you in the same way anymore. You don't fall for the fears that control you. You don't silence yourself and censor yourself for fear of the consequences. You just bloody do it. And, if we don't start looking authority in the eye collectively and saying, no, not having it, then authority will get what it wants. And not too long from here now either. I mean, we are really closing in on the end game. So we have a choice. We can go on as we are and look where that got us, or we can come from a point of view of we're consciousness, and whatever happens will still be consciousness, and do what is necessary rather than running away from it, because 8 billion people cannot be controlled by a relative handful unless the 8 billion acquiesce to the few.
Thanks for joining me today, David. It's been an absolute pleasure, an absolute honour to have you on Unchained.
Thanks, mate. It's been a pleasure.
Absolute pleasure.
I'll go out in that sun now. There you go.
Yeah. Go and enjoy yourself, mate.
Great. See ya.
Take care, mate. Bye.
Bye.